So really quickly, I did want to talk about some of the other networks that are here, and we'll get much more into the relevant ones as we do more and more work together in Houdini. But for now, the thing that you should know is essentially these are different contexts that allow you to do different things. So the CHOP network here allows you to procedurally control channels that are happening here. I'll show you a very quick example. I'm going to right click here, do motion effects, and put a noise on here. And that applies noise to the channels. If I go back up here, you'll see what's happened is that Houdini has created a CHOP network for us, and we dive inside and we get a little network that controls the noise parameters that are here. So I'll just bring this amplitude way down, and you'll see what that is. It's a procedural way of affecting channel values that are here. And any channel that is using CHOPS will have this little orange indicator here on the side of the channel. I'm going to delete that out of there, and we're no longer being affected. So you have CHOPS. You have the compositing context here, more commonly known as COPS. And if we dive inside there, I have something already set up from a previous thing in here. You'll see that if you go into your composite view, that you have a compositor where you can do some very basic compositing operations. Now, we're not going to be talking about COPS at all, really, maybe just very, very slightly, because at some point this is going to be completely rewritten and this tutorial will become outdated very quickly. So we won't get too much into that. Let me go back into our scene view, and we'll go back to object context. Out context is typically where render outputs can be rendered from. So you can do things like putting down a Karma render node, and this is where you would render to disk. You can even render geometry. So you can fetch geometry and write it out as geometry sequences, and there are a few other things that you can do in the out context. The material context is for building materials, and you'll see we have a bunch of material things in here. I won't get too much into that right now. The shop context is what the material context used to be many years ago, and it is being sunsetted, I believe, and typically has no use, so that typically you don't need to worry about. The stage is all things USD. So if you're setting materials in USD, you're rendering using Karma and USD, you're setting up scenes in USD, all of that stuff, you'll want to be doing all that through the stage. And you'll see the stage looks pretty different. It even has its own Solaris desktop here with a bunch of other things, and we're not going to get too much into that right now. We'll go back into build and go into our object context. And then finally, we have the TOPS context here, which has a bunch of nodes for doing a procedural dependency graphs. These are some pretty complicated methods of accessing file systems, doing all kinds of interesting things in Houdini, and setting up processes that sort of work together in sequence or can be split over various different CPUs and processing machines. So this we'll get into just a tiny little bit. We'll kind of get our toes wet, so to speak, with TOPS. Now, the interesting thing is that a lot of these contexts allow you to put other contexts inside them. So here we're in the object context, but I can put a ROP network here. I can go inside and I can go and find that same Karma node, and I can put that in here and do rendering. And I can go inside a sphere, for instance, and I can put down a material network. And I can go inside, and then I can, find something like a principled shader, and I can start authoring a shader inside here. So because you have this flexibility, it's great, but you also have to be very disciplined about where you're putting things and how you're working to make sure nobody is confused. So I'll show you how I like to work as we continue in the process here, but while you're working on your own, think logically and think where things should go and not just put things in haphazard places. Matte networks are great to put inside the geometry where you will actually be texturing them. So for instance, now I could package up this entire sphere as one thing and all the materials will come along with it because they are part of that network. So if I go and do something like, let's say we'll assign a material. Very simple way. Do this, I assign my material. It says, where's my material? I'm going to go here and I'm going to choose the principled shader and I'm going to do it as a relative path. Click accept. You can see that now we have that shader applied and it's all part of here. Now, nothing's stopping me, by the way, from going and building that exact same shader out here and finding it and applying it. It's whatever is working for you. But once you start building assets and things, like if this sphere became an actual reusable asset that I wanted to share with people with materials attached, you're going to want everything to be packaged up intelligently. And this is how you do it. What I've seen with rendering, some people love to be rendering through the out context. Some people do prefer to be putting a ROP network down in the main context. Some people even like to be putting ROP networks inside their geometry, which you can do as well. If you had a process that needed to write out a whole bunch of things related to this geometry, nothing's stopping you from putting a ROP network in here and then putting down whatever ROPs you need and then clicking render to render them all out. So there is a lot of flexibility involved with working with Houdini, and just make sure you're working in a way that's logical and that makes sense for your needs. And if you're working with other people, will make sense with how they plan to use your project as well.